Hey everyone, and welcome to SkillCapped. In this guide, we'll be breaking down exactly how the best players gather intel in Valorant while still keeping themselves safe from danger. Gathering intel is one of the most important things you can do in Valorant, as the more information you have in the game, the easier it is for you to make the correct decisions within your round. The truth is, Valorant is a game of information. At the core, the game is about the gunplay, but the information you have will almost always influence how you play an encounter. For example, if you start out a round and discover there are 4 players all stacked on B site, you're likely going to be more inclined to rotate towards A site because it's likely going to be the easier site to take. Because intel gathering is something you will quite literally do every single round in Valorant, it's important to know how to do it safely and effectively, which is why we've created this guide to elevate your game and help you become the best player you can be. So if you want to see more premium guides like this one, make sure to like, subscribe, and tick that bell to be notified whenever we upload a video. And without further ado, let's get into it. Now, we've already touched on the topic of intel gathering, but what exactly is the purpose of intel gathering? We've all been in those ranked games where it feels like the enemy team, or even our team, is basically just holding W and running at the enemy team and winning. They're not intel gathering, they're not defaulting, they're simply outgunning their opponents, and it's working. So why bother intel gathering in the first place? Although there are some games where it feels like you're just entirely outmatched and outgunned by your opponents, there are going to be times when just rushing a site is not the best solution. When you run into a situation like this, you'll often hear people suggest that you should default. Defaulting can be a very good idea when hard pushes are getting shut down, but oftentimes when teams, especially at lower ranks, suggest defaulting, what they really mean is that you should play for info. If you're unfamiliar with what a default is, it basically just refers to spreading out and setting up a default or normal strategy over the course of a few rounds. An example of this could be Omen smoking vents every single round, Skye flashing into tunnels, Yoru using footsteps in tunnels, Cypher using his cage on A site. The reason you do this is because you want to condition your enemies and use these default setups to open up future possibilities for your team throughout the rounds. The easiest example of why this is beneficial is Viper. If a Viper places her wall on the same site she is pushing every single round, it's going to be really easy for the enemy team to figure out where they are pushing and rotate appropriately. But if she is consistently placing her wall on A site and then her team is playing towards mid or B, it's going to be a lot more effective when her team actually decides to go A, as the enemies won't see it coming from a mile away. That is just one purpose of a default though. The other purpose of a default is to help your team grab territory and intel to use later in the round. The reason taking control of different points of the map is so good for your team is because it provides your team with more information while also taking away information from the opposing team. A good example of this is controlling either A main or B main on a set. If the defense does not control either A main or B main, they are in a very dangerous position because both of these positions are where the offense would generally execute out of. However, if the defense does control one of these positions, it becomes a lot easier to predict where the offense might be within the round. Once you have the information that nobody is towards B, you can make an effort to rotate more players to help with the potential A push. Alright, but now that we know the purpose of intel gathering, what agents are good at intel gathering? The truth is, all agents are pretty good at intel gathering, but they all do it in different ways. Sova is probably the first agent you think of when you think of intel, and rightfully so, that's the major focus of the character. But what if I told you Raze was also an intel gatherer? Not just her boombot either, but even her grenades are capable of grabbing intel for her team. The purpose of a character like Raze is to make an entrance onto site and help her team clear out corners. Throwing a grenade to clear out a corner is at the very core intel for your team. Having one less spot that your team needs to worry about when pushing onto site can make things a lot easier for your team, and although this doesn't make Raze the best intel gatherer in the game, it is important to recognize that intel is not one agent's job exclusively, and all agents have tools to obtain information within the game. That being said, the ones that can do it the most effectively are Sova, Cypher, and Skye. Killjoy is an honorable mention here, but her utility is quite a bit slower to use than the other agents, making it a lot more effective for watching flanks than it is for grabbing territory. The reason these agents are the best for intel gathering is because they can all do it without risking their own lives within the round. This is through utility like Sova's drone, recon darts, Sova's ultimate, Cypher's camera, tripwires, cages making noise when players pass through them, Cypher's ultimate, Skye's wolf, her call out when she flashes players, and Skye's ultimate ability tracking down targets. All of these abilities give a large amount of information within the round and are intended to make players' life a lot easier. What exactly is the best way to intel gather though, and how do we do it without getting ourselves killed? To explain this, I'm going to be breaking down a few rounds from 100 Thieves player Hiko and explain how he effectively scouts for info within his rounds. The first round we're going to be looking at takes place over on Haven at C Long. Hiko is playing Sova in this round, but this actually isn't that important to the round, and what he does here you can do on any character actually. He starts out the round after hearing the Jett use her ultimate, and he decides it's a good idea to get some information on whether or not her team is taking control of C Long. To do this safely, Hiko decides to jiggle peek Long and even throws in a pre-fire in case anyone is actually peeking the angle. This is a moderately safe tactic for Hiko to perform for a few reasons. The first being he only exposes his body for a brief second, making it so that the enemies will need to react very quickly to be able to capitalize on his blind peek. The second being because it is the first time Hiko has jiggled this angle, they are not going to be anticipating the peek if they are here, so it'll be very difficult for them to punish this. Oftentimes you will see worse players peek the same angle multiple times after having been spotted once, and this will normally result in them dying as the enemies are already prepared for this peek. But because this is the first time Hiko has jiggled this angle, there is very little risk. The third and very important reason that this is a safe peek though is because of how early in the round it still is. The chance there's going to be multiple players ready to contest Hiko here is incredibly low. If Hiko decided to blind peek this and do the same thing 20 seconds into the round with zero information, it's entirely possible they could all be pushed up and ready to punish him. And that is why the timing is incredibly important when you're intel gathering. Now as the round goes on, Hiko continues to jump peek Long in an attempt to discover the position of enemies, but actually doesn't see anything. This isn't a problem though, because in Valorant, not seeing things is oftentimes as valuable as seeing things. Because Hiko doesn't spot anything Long, they can infer that the enemies are likely pushing either A or mid. It is unlikely that the enemies intend to push Garage because the most common reason to take Garage is for a C execute. However, since Hiko doesn't see anything Long, the likelihood of a C push is decreased significantly. Because of this information, his team is now able to focus a lot more attention into the middle of the map and are able to effectively shut down the enemy team's B execute when it comes. This is an example of how you can safely intel gather as any agent without putting yourself in too much danger. And before we move on to the other examples we have, if you're serious about improving, be sure to head on over to SkillCapped.com to unlock our hyper improvement system. We have up-to-date lineups for each agent, courses on all the mechanics needed to win more gunfights, Smurf commentaries where a high-ranked player walks you through how to carry in your rank, and so much more. Come join over 500,000 satisfied members of SkillCapped, improve that KDA, and get that rank you've always wanted at SkillCapped.com. Link in the description below. The next round we'll be taking a look at from Hiko though, he'll actually be playing Cypher on Attack Haven. He starts out the round with a tripwire to watch A flank and a cage on A long. This is a very common default you'll see from Cyphers. The reason this cage is so powerful is because it forces anyone who is playing long to have to back up due to the threat that a player could be pushing up short. The beautiful thing about cages like this is you actually don't ever need to push up short. It's just an act of denying information here that makes them have to play a lot differently because of the threat that you could be pushing up short. After caging long, he sees his Reyna is pushing through the cage and decides to push up with her to create more pressure. As they are pushing up long, you'll notice his team is creating a lot of pressure in the middle of the map as well. Because of all the pressure in mid, they can use this as a distraction and potentially find an easy entrance onto A site. Once they pushed up long, Hiko throws out his camera on default box and scouts both left and right for his Reyna, telling her it is safe for entry. Because of this camera Hiko uses, it makes it infinitely easier for Reyna to make her entry onto site, as she doesn't have to worry about so many angles at once. You'll notice Hiko actually pulls his cam back immediately and tries to ready it for a second use now, placing it up high above the site after planting the bomb where he can spot out anyone entering through CT or Heaven. Unfortunately, Hiko ends up getting taken out at the end of the round, but he has already gotten the information of the last remaining players and his team is able to close out the round for him. This was a fairly aggressive round though, using Cypher Cam to grab territory. It's important to remember you can do the same thing even more effectively though, using Sova's drone or Sky's wolf. The most dangerous part of entering any area of the map is all the locations enemies can be, but any way you can clear out some of those locations is going to make your life a lot easier. This means using Molly's Phoenix ult, your ult, Raze's Boombot, Breach's Aftershock, pretty much anything you can think of to clear out corners and get information of where enemies are or are not is going to help you when taking a site. In terms of Sova's drone and Sky's wolf, sometimes it can be hard for players to find the perfect time to use them. What I've seen a lot of pro players do when playing these characters is practically just using the abilities at the beginning of the round on offense, as in matchmaking, pushes on defense can be fairly common, and just getting that first bit of information at the start of the round can be incredibly beneficial. The first bit of information can sometimes be the most dangerous to get in the round, so rather than risking a player's life, if you have a Sova drone or a Skywolf, it's oftentimes a lot smarter to use that. The last thing you want is your Brimstone walking around the first corner and getting opt right away. Aside from that though, you're probably wondering some other ways different agents can grab intel in rounds. To showcase this a little more, let's take a look at popular streamer Sean Garris and how he utilized Yoru to pick up some decent information within this round. At the start of this clip, you'll hear Sean mention how he believes Killjoy is playing C-Site and he wants to use his Yoru footsteps in an attempt to locate her turret's location.
I'm gonna send my footsteps up C to figure out where this turret is.
Short.
Go shoot the turret's gonna shoot it.
Notice how he doesn't just approach C long and pull out his footsteps alone, but rather this play is done with another player by his side. This is going to severely reduce the risk of him being punished for attempting to use utility in the open. Sean prepares his footsteps and discovers Killjoy's turret is located on the left of sight. Not only does this locate the turret, but he also spots the Killjoy backside on C and is even able to get the enemy Omen to smoke C long as well. Although Omen's smoke has a very long range, it's probably likely that Omen is closer to C side, seeing that his team is currently pushing A and Omen's smoke likely would have been more beneficial on A site. With this information that Sean and his ally Reyna obtained, his team is going to be able to take A site a lot more safely, knowing that there is less pressure from the Killjoy and Omen on A side. The key factors I'd like to point out here while Sean was gathering information are: A, he did not do it alone, there is safety in numbers and his team knows that, and that's why there are two of them here, and B, he used his utility to try to obtain information safely from a distance, rather than using his own body to check the site for the turret. The number one thing you want to remember while intel gathering is that your goal is to get as much information as you can while putting yourself at as little risk as possible. The bottom line is sometimes you're going to have to risk dying to obtain information, and oftentimes that's not even a bad thing. Playing too safe is definitely a thing, and it's important to take risks in your game. But you should take calculated risks and take them when you've already exhausted all of your other options. If you're dying while attempting to gather info frequently, always think about how you could have used your utility to make a peak safer for yourself. Was there a corner you could have flashed? Was there a location you could have smoked? Was there a spot you could have recon? These are the questions you should ask yourself while playing to help you become a better player. But if you want the fast track to improve, win more gunfights, and get the rank you've always wanted, then check out SkillCapped.com. Link in the description below. We put a lot of effort in this video to make sure that it is the best guide for obtaining info like a pro. So make sure to show your support by dropping a like, subscribing, and hitting that bell icon to get more premium guides just like this one with one goal in mind: helping you become a better player. Lastly, we'd love to hear your opinion on Skye versus Sova in terms of intel gatherers. They both gather a large amount of information, but do it in different ways. Which one do you think is better right now? Be sure to let us know in the comments below. We here at SkillCapped want to thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.